The mare's labored breathing filled the barn with a sound that made Victoria Whitmore's chest tighten, and she pressed her forehead against the stall door, whispering words she had never dared say aloud before. It was August 1882, and the Colorado mountain air hung thick with the scent of hay and leather in the dimness of the barn that belonged to her father's ranch just outside Telluride. The mare, a beautiful chestnut she had raised from a foal, was struggling through a difficult birth, and Victoria found herself alone with her thoughts and fears. "You have to be braver than this," she told herself, her voice barely audible in the quiet space. "Papa always said you were too soft for ranch life, too gentle for the hard choices. But maybe being gentle is not the same as being weak. Maybe caring deeply is its own kind of strength." She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, leaving a streak of dust across her cheek. "You cannot save everyone, Victoria. You cannot fix everything that breaks. Sometimes you have to let go, even when it tears your heart in two. Sometimes you have to trust that you did everything you could." The mare whinnied softly, and Victoria reached through the slats to stroke her neck. "But not today," she continued, her voice firmer now. "Today you fight. Today you do not give up because this life matters and the foal inside matters, and sometimes the only way through fear is straight ahead with your eyes wide open." "That is good advice," came a deep voice from behind her, making her spin around with a gasp. "Take it." A man stood in the doorway of the barn, backlit by the fading afternoon sun, his broad shoulders filling the frame. He stepped forward, and she could see him clearly now. Tall, with dark hair that curled slightly at his collar, weathered skin that spoke of long days under the sun, and eyes the color of creek water in summer. He wore the simple clothing of a working cowboy, dusty chaps over worn denim, a faded shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows, and a hat he removed as he approached. "I did not mean to startle you, miss," he said, his voice carrying a quiet authority that seemed at odds with the gentleness in his expression. "I heard you talking, and then I heard your horse. Sounds like she is in trouble." Victoria felt heat rise to her face, mortified that someone had overheard her private moment of weakness. "I thought I was alone," she managed to say, lifting her chin despite her embarrassment. "And yes, she has been laboring for hours. I have sent for the veterinarian, but he is dealing with an emergency at the Morrison Ranch, and I fear she does not have much time." The cowboy moved closer, his gait easy and confident. "May I take a look? I have helped birth more foals than I can count. Name is Cole Patterson, and I am passing through on my way to the silver mines. Was hoping to water my horse and maybe ask about work, but it seems you have a more pressing need at the moment." There was something in his manner that made Victoria trust him instantly, though her mother would have scolded her for being so quick to accept help from a stranger. But her mother had died 3 years ago, and her father was away in Denver negotiating cattle prices, leaving Victoria alone to manage the ranch with only their aging foreman and a handful of ranch hands who were out on the far pastures. "Please," she said, stepping aside. "I would be grateful for any help." Cole handed her his hat and moved to the stall with the practiced ease of someone who had spent his entire life around horses. He spoke softly to the mare, his hands gentle but sure as he examined her. Victoria watched his face, seeing the concentration there, the way his brow furrowed slightly. "The foal is breech," he said after a moment, "but I think we can turn it. I will need your help, though. Are you squeamish?" "No," Victoria said firmly, setting his hat on a hook and rolling up her own sleeves. "Tell me what to do." For the next hour they worked together in the close confines of the stall, their bodies moving in unspoken coordination as they fought to save both mare and foal. Cole's voice remained calm throughout, instructing Victoria, encouraging the horse, never wavering even when the situation seemed most dire. Victoria found herself matching his calmness, drawing strength from his presence, and she understood then what she had been telling herself. That courage was not the absence of fear, but the choice to act despite it. When the foal finally slipped into the world, wet and trembling but alive, Victoria felt tears stream down her face unchecked. The mare nickered softly, already turning to nuzzle her baby, and Cole sat back on his heels, his shirt soaked with sweat and other less pleasant things, a tired smile on his face. "You did well," he said to Victoria, and there was genuine admiration in his voice. "That took real grit." "We did well," she corrected, wiping her face with a relatively clean part of her sleeve. "I could not have managed without you, Mr. Patterson. I owe you a debt I am not sure I can repay." "Cole," he said, standing and offering her a hand up. When she took it, she felt the calluses on his palm, the strength in his grip, and something else, a jolt of awareness that made her breath catch. "And you owe me nothing, though I would not say no to that water for my horse and maybe a chance to wash up." Victoria laughed, a sound that felt strange after the tension of the past hours. "Of course. And supper too if you will stay. It is the least I can do." As she led him from the barn toward the pump behind the main house, the sun was setting over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that seemed almost too beautiful to be real. Victoria's ranch sat in a valley surrounded by peaks that still held snow on their highest points even in August, and the air had that particular crystalline quality that came with altitude. Telluride itself was a growing mining town a few miles away, full of fortune seekers and rough men, but out here on the ranch, there was a piece that Victoria had always treasured. Cole's horse, a sturdy bay gelding, stood patiently where he had tied it near the barn. Victoria helped him see to the animal's needs, and as they worked, she found herself studying him when she thought he was not looking. There was something different about him, a quietness that seemed to run deep, and she wondered what his story was, what had brought him to Colorado, what he was running from or running toward. "You have a fine place here," Cole said as he splashed water on his face and arms, scrubbing away the grime of the road and the barn. "How long has it been in your family?" "My father bought the land 12 years ago," Victoria replied, leaning against the pump with her arms crossed. "I was 10 years old and I thought we had moved to the edge of the world. We came from Boston and the mountains seemed so huge and wild, but I grew to love it. This place is in my blood now." "Boston," Cole repeated, glancing at her with interest. "That is a long way from here." "Your father must be a brave man to make such a change." "Or a desperate one," Victoria said with a slight smile. "He wanted a fresh start after my mother became ill. He thought the mountain air might help her, but it was already too late." She lived 3 more years, which was longer than the doctors had given her, so perhaps it did help after all. Cole nodded slowly, understanding in his eyes. "Loss has a way of reshaping us," he said quietly. "Makes us into different people than we might have been." There was a story there, Victoria sensed, but she did not press. Instead, she showed him to the bunkhouse where he could change into a clean shirt she fetched from her father's room, one of the older ones that her father would not miss. While Cole made himself presentable, Victoria hurried to the main house to do the same, scrubbing quickly and changing into a simple calico dress that was far from fancy, but at least was not covered in barn debris. The housekeeper, Mrs. Chen, a Chinese woman who had come to work for the family 5 years ago after her husband died in a mining accident, raised an eyebrow when Victoria explained they would have a guest for supper. "A cowboy you just met?" she asked in her precise English, her hands never stopping their work as she kneaded dough for biscuits. "Your father would not approve." "My father is not here," Victoria said, though without any heat. She had tremendous respect for Mrs. Chen, who had become something of a surrogate mother to her. "And this man saved our mare and her foal. The least we can do is feed him." Mrs. Chen studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "You have your mother's kind heart," she said, "but be careful, little bird. Not all strangers are trustworthy." "I know," Victoria assured her, "but I think this one is." Supper was a simple affair of stew and fresh biscuits, served at the kitchen table rather than the formal dining room. Cole had returned wearing her father's shirt, which fit him well enough across the shoulders though it was a bit short in the sleeves, and he had slicked his damp hair back from his face. In the lamplight, Victoria could see that he was younger than she had first thought, perhaps 25 or 26, only a few years older than her own 22 years. They talked as they ate, the conversation flowing more easily than Victoria would have expected with a stranger. Cole told her he had grown up on a ranch in Texas, that he had learned horses and cattle from his father, who had been a vaquero in his youth. When Victoria asked why he had left, his expression grew shadowed. "My father passed 2 years ago," he said, his voice steady but colored with old grief. "And the ranch was heavily mortgaged. The bank took it before I could earn enough to save it. I have been working my way north ever since, taking jobs where I can find them, trying to build up a stake so I can start over somewhere." "I am sorry," Victoria said softly. "That must have been terribly difficult." Cole shrugged, but she could see the tension in his shoulders. "Life is not fair, but we keep going anyway. That is what you were telling yourself in the barn, was it not? That sometimes all you can do is face forward and take the next step." Victoria felt that heat in her cheeks again, remembering her words and how vulnerable she had felt speaking them aloud. "I did not realize anyone could hear me," she admitted. "I must have sounded foolish." "Not foolish," Cole said, his gaze meeting hers across the table. "Honest. There is a difference. Most people spend so much time pretending to be stronger than they are that they forget it is acceptable to struggle. But you were not pretending. You were giving yourself the truth, even when it was hard. That takes courage." Something shifted in that moment. Something Victoria could not quite name but felt in the center of her chest like a warm glow. Mrs. Chen, who had been moving quietly around the kitchen, cleared her throat meaningfully, and Victoria realized she had been staring. "Do you have a place to stay in town?" she asked quickly, trying to regain her composure. "Or were you planning to camp?" "I was going to make camp a few miles up the road," Cole replied. "But if you are offering the bunkhouse for the night, I would be grateful. It has been a long few days on the trail." "Of course," Victoria said. "The bunkhouse has empty beds and you are welcome to stay as long as you need." "In fact," she continued, the idea forming even as she spoke, "if you are looking for work, we could use another hand here at the ranch. Our foreman is getting on in years, and the men we have are good but stretched thin. My father would not object if you proved yourself useful." Cole set down his fork, considering her words. "Are you sure? You do not know me." "I know you helped a stranger without asking for anything in return," Victoria said. "I know you are good with horses and not afraid of hard work. That is enough for me to offer you a trial, at least until my father returns. Then he can make the final decision." A slow smile spread across Cole's face, transforming it from handsome to something that made Victoria's heart skip. "Then I accept," he said. "Thank you, Miss Whitmore. You will not regret it." But as Victoria lay in her bed that night, listening to the wind whisper through the pines outside her window, she wondered if perhaps she might regret it after all, though not for the reasons Mrs. Chen had warned about. There was something about Cole Patterson that had gotten under her skin in just a few hours, and she suspected that having him close by for days or weeks might prove dangerous to the careful guard she had placed around her heart. The next morning dawned clear and bright, with that particular quality of light that only seemed to exist in the high mountains. Victoria rose early, as was her habit, and dressed in her riding skirt and boots, braiding her long, dark hair into a practical plait. When she stepped out onto the porch with her first cup of coffee, she found Cole already at work in the corral, exercising his gelding. He moved with the horse in perfect harmony, his body relaxed but alert, and Victoria found herself mesmerized by the sight. She had grown up around cowboys and ranchers, but there was something different about the way Cole rode, a connection with the animal that went beyond simple skill. It was artistry, she realized, and it was beautiful to watch. Cole must have sensed her watching because he turned his head and raised a hand in greeting. Victoria waved back, then made herself walk purposefully toward the barn rather than standing there like a moonstruck girl. The foal and mare needed checking, and she had a dozen other tasks to complete before the day was through. Inside the barn, she found both horses doing well. The foal, a little colt with a white star on his forehead, was already standing steadily and nursing enthusiastically. The mare looked tired but content, and when Victoria entered the stall to examine them both more closely, she felt a surge of gratitude for Cole's timely intervention. "They look good," came his voice from behind her, and she turned to find him leaning against the stall door, his hat pushed back on his head. "That colt has spirit. He will be a fine horse when he grows." "Thanks to you," Victoria said. "I truly do not know what would have happened if you had not arrived when you did." "You would have figured it out," Cole said with certainty. "You were already halfway there. I just provided an extra pair of hands." They worked together through the morning, Cole proving himself as capable as Victoria had hoped. He cleaned stalls without complaint, repaired a broken section of fence with efficiency, and showed one of the younger ranch hands a better way to secure a saddle. By lunchtime, even old Frank, the foreman who had been with the ranch since the beginning, was nodding in approval. "That Patterson fellow knows his business," Frank said to Victoria as they stood watching Cole work with a fractious 2-year-old in the round pen. "Where did you find him?" "He found me," Victoria replied. "Or perhaps we found each other. Either way, I think we are lucky he came along when he did." Frank gave her a sharp look, his weathered face creasing in concern. "You be careful there, Miss Victoria. He seems like a decent sort, but you do not know anything about him, and your father would have my hide if I let something improper happen while he was away." Victoria bristled slightly at the implication. "I am not a child, Frank, and I am perfectly capable of maintaining proper behavior. I simply recognized a good worker when I saw one, and we need the help." I know," Frank said, holding up his hands in surrender. "Just looking out for you, that is all. Your mama, God rest her soul, made me promise to keep you safe, and I take that promise seriously." Victoria's irritation faded at the mention of her mother. "I know you do, Frank, and I appreciate it. But truly, Cole seems like an honorable man. He has given me no cause for concern." Over the following days, Cole became a fixture on the ranch, fitting in as smoothly as if he had always been there. He took on whatever task was needed, from the mundane to the challenging, and he did it all with a quiet competence that won over even the most skeptical of the ranch hands. But it was in the evenings, after the work was done and the men had retired to the bunkhouse for cards and conversation, that Victoria found herself seeking out Cole's company. They would sit on the porch sometimes, watching the sun set behind the mountains, talking about everything and nothing. Cole told her stories of his childhood in Texas, of learning to rope from his father, of the time he had tried to ride a longhorn on a dare, and ended up in the creek. Victoria shared her own memories of Boston, of the shock of arriving in Colorado, of slowly learning to love this wild, beautiful place. "You miss the city?" Cole asked one evening, his long legs stretched out in front of him, his chair tilted back on two legs. Victoria considered the question carefully. "Sometimes I miss the culture," she admitted. "The museums and theaters, the bookshops, but I do not miss the crowds or the constant noise. Here I can breathe. Here I feel like myself." "I understand that," Cole said. "There is something about wide, open spaces that lets a person expand into who they really are. In cities, everyone is pressed together so tight that you have to make yourself smaller just to fit." "Exactly," Victoria said, pleased that he understood. "That is exactly it." They fell into a comfortable silence, the kind that only exists between people who are at ease with each other. Victoria found herself acutely aware of Cole's presence, of the way the lamplight from inside the house gilded the edges of his profile, of how his hands rested relaxed on the arms of his chair, of the steady rhythm of his breathing. "Victoria," he said suddenly, his voice serious. "May I ask you something?" "Of course," she replied, though her heart began to beat a bit faster. "That day in the barn, when I first heard you talking to yourself, you said something about not being able to save everyone. Were you talking about your mother?" Victoria drew in a breath, not expecting the question but finding that she did not mind it. "In part," she said slowly, "but also about life in general. We lost cattle to a late blizzard last spring. One of our ranch hands was injured in a fall and can no longer work. There have been so many things I could not fix, could not prevent. Sometimes I feel like I am trying to hold back a flood with my bare hands." Cole let his chair drop forward, the front legs hitting the porch with a soft thud. He turned to face her, his expression intent. "You cannot hold back floods," he said. "But you can learn to swim. You can build boats. You can help others to safety even when you cannot control the water. That is what you have been doing, Victoria. You are not failing. You are surviving, and you are helping others survive too." She felt tears prick at her eyes, surprised by how deeply his words affected her. "How do you know exactly what to say?" she whispered. "Because I have been where you are," Cole replied. "After I lost the ranch, I spent months feeling like I had failed my father, failed myself. But eventually I realized that some things are beyond our control, and the only real failure is giving up entirely. You have not given up. You are still fighting for this place, for these people. That matters more than you know." Victoria wiped at her eyes, laughing a little at herself. "I seem to cry a great deal around you. You must think me terribly weak." "I think you are one of the strongest people I have ever met," Cole said, and the sincerity in his voice left no room for doubt. "Strength is not about never breaking. It is about putting yourself back together afterward." Their eyes met and held, and Victoria felt something shift between them, a recognition that passed deeper than words. Her breath caught in her throat, and for a moment she thought Cole might lean forward, might close the distance between them. But then Mrs. Chen called from inside that she was retiring for the night, and the moment fractured. Cole stood, offering Victoria his hand. "I should let you get your rest," he said. "Tomorrow we are moving the cattle to the upper pasture, and it will be a long day." Victoria took his hand, letting him help her to her feet, though she did not need the assistance. "Thank you, Cole," she said softly, "for everything." "Anytime," he replied, and then he was walking away toward the bunkhouse, his silhouette gradually swallowed by the darkness. Victoria stood on the porch for a long time after he left, her hand tingling where he had held it, her mind replaying their conversation. She was in dangerous territory, she knew. She was falling for Cole Patterson, this stranger who had wandered into her life only days ago. But even knowing the danger, she could not seem to make herself pull back. The cattle drive to the upper pasture went smoothly, thanks in large part to Cole's expertise. He had a way with the animals, anticipating their movements, positioning himself exactly where he needed to be to guide the herd without forcing them. Victoria rode alongside him for much of the day, and she could not help but notice how natural it felt, working beside him like this. "You are a natural cowgirl," Cole said at one point, grinning at her as she neatly cut a stray cow back toward the herd. "I bet you could hold your own at any ranch in the West." "I had good teachers," Victoria replied, returning his grin. "Frank taught me everything he knows, and my father insisted I learn the business from the ground up. He said I would need to understand every aspect of ranching if I was to help run the place." "Smart man," Cole said. "Too many owners stay in their big houses and have no idea what the real work entails. But you are different. You get your hands dirty." "There is no other way to do it," Victoria said. "How can I ask the men to do something I would not do myself?" By the time they returned to the ranch house that evening, Victoria was exhausted but satisfied. The cattle were settled in the rich upper pasture where they would graze for the next few weeks, and everything had gone according to plan. She was dusty and sweaty and desperately in need of a bath, but she felt accomplished. Mrs. Chen had prepared a hearty supper, and after Victoria had cleaned up, she joined Cole and Frank at the kitchen table. The conversation was easy, full of talk about the day's work and plans for the week ahead. But Victoria noticed the way Cole's eyes kept finding hers, the small smiles he gave her when he thought Frank was not looking, and she felt a warmth spread through her that had nothing to do with the hot food. After supper, Frank excused himself to check on one of the horses that had developed a slight limp, leaving Victoria and Cole alone in the kitchen. Mrs. Chen had already retired, and the house was quiet around them. "Let me help you clean up," Cole offered, standing to gather the plates. "You do not have to do that," Victoria protested, but he was already moving to the sink. "I want to," he said simply. They worked side by side in companionable silence, washing and drying the dishes, putting things away. It was such a domestic scene, so ordinary and yet somehow intimate, and Victoria found herself imagining what it might be like if this were their house, if they did this every night together. "Victoria," Cole said as he dried the last plate, "I need to tell you something." Her heart jumped into her throat. "What is it?" Cole set down the plate and the towel, turning to face her fully. "I came here planning to stay only a few days, just long enough to earn a bit of money and move on. But being here working with you, I find myself not wanting to leave. This place, these mountains, they feel like somewhere I could belong. And you." He paused, seeming to search for the right words. "You make me want to stay even more." Victoria's hands were still wet, and she dried them on her apron without thinking, her eyes never leaving his face. "I want you to stay," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I know we have only known each other for a short time, but I feel like I understand you in a way I cannot explain. When you are around, everything seems more vivid, more real. I look forward to seeing you each morning, and I find excuses to work near you during the day. I know I should not feel this way so quickly, but I cannot seem to help it." Cole closed the distance between them in 2 strides, his hands coming up to cup her face gently. "I feel the same way," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "From the moment I saw you in that barn, talking to yourself so bravely, so honestly, I felt something shift inside me, and every day since has only made it stronger." "Cole," Victoria breathed, and then his lips were on hers, soft and warm and perfect. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, as if they were both afraid of breaking something precious. But then Victoria's arms came up around his neck, and Cole pulled her closer, and the kiss deepened into something that made her knees weak. She had been kissed before, once by a boy in Boston when she was 17, but it had been nothing like this. This was fire and sweetness, promise and passion, and when they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Victoria felt as if the entire world had rearranged itself around this moment. "I should not have done that," Cole said, though he made no move to step away. "Your father is not here to give permission, and I am just a hired hand with nothing to offer you." "You are not just anything," Victoria said fiercely, her hand still locked behind his neck. "You are the man who helped me save my horse. You are the man who understands me better than anyone I have ever met. You are the man I am falling in love with, and I do not care about permission or propriety. I care about this, about us." Cole searched her face, and whatever he saw there must have satisfied him because he smiled, a real smile that reached his eyes and made them crinkle at the corners. "Then we will figure it out together," he said. "But I want to do this properly. When your father returns, I will speak to him. I will ask for the right to court you officially. And if he agrees, I will spend every day proving to him and to you that I am worthy of your trust." "You already have my trust," Victoria said, but she understood what he was saying. For all that the West was wild and rules were sometimes flexible, there were still social expectations, especially for a woman of her standing. "My father will be back in 2 weeks. Until then, we should probably be more careful." "Agreed," Cole said, though he stole one more quick kiss before stepping back. "But that does not change how I feel. You are the most remarkable woman I have ever met, Victoria Whitmore, and I intend to spend as long as it takes convincing you of that." Victoria laughed, the sound bright and happy in the quiet kitchen. "I think I am already convinced," she said, "but I will not stop you from trying." The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of work and stolen moments. Victoria and Cole maintained propriety when others were around, but they found ways to be alone together, riding out to check on the cattle, working together in the barn, sitting on the porch long after everyone else had gone to sleep. They talked about everything, their dreams for the future, their fears, their past heartbreaks and triumphs. Victoria learned that Cole had once been engaged to a girl in Texas, but she had broken it off when the ranch failed, unable to face a future of uncertainty. Cole learned that Victoria had turned down 2 proposals from wealthy men in Telluride because she could not imagine marrying someone she did not love. "I used to think love was something that happened slowly," Victoria confessed one evening as they sat by the creek that ran through the property. "That it built up over years of companionship and shared experiences. But now I think maybe love can strike like lightning, sudden and undeniable." "Lightning can burn," Cole said, his fingers laced with hers. "But it can also illuminate everything, showing you what was always there but hidden in the dark." "Is that what I was to you?" Victoria asked. "Hidden until you found me?" "No," Cole said, turning to look at her. "You were the light itself. I was the one hidden, wandering in the dark until you showed me there was still brightness in the world." Victoria leaned her head on his shoulder, content in a way she had never been before. The sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant shades of crimson and gold, and the water burbled over smooth stones at their feet. In that moment, everything felt perfect, as if the universe had aligned itself exactly as it should be. But perfection is always fragile, and Victoria should have known that something would come to test it. Her father, Thomas Whitmore, arrived home on a Tuesday afternoon, 3 days earlier than expected. Victoria was in the garden behind the house, picking vegetables for supper, when she heard the sound of his horse. She dropped the basket and ran around to the front, her face lighting up with genuine joy at seeing him. "Papa," she called, and he dismounted to catch her in a bear hug. "My girl," he said, his voice warm with affection. "I missed you. The house is too quiet when you are not there to fill it with your chatter." Thomas Whitmore was a big man, tall and broad-shouldered, with silver threading through his dark hair and a beard he kept neatly trimmed. He had kind eyes that could turn stern when necessary, and he had always been a fair if exacting father. Victoria loved him deeply, but she also knew he had expectations for her future that might not align with what she wanted. "How was Denver?" Victoria asked as they walked toward the house together, his arm still around her shoulders. "Did you get a good price for the cattle?" "Better than I hoped," her father replied. "The market is strong right now, and I managed to secure contracts for next year as well. We should do well, barring any disasters." They talked business as they went inside, where Mrs. Chen greeted Thomas with genuine warmth and immediately set about preparing his favorite meal. It was only later, after he had washed up and changed clothes, that Thomas asked about what had happened on the ranch in his absence. Victoria told him everything, from the mare's difficult birth to Cole's timely arrival, from the work he had done to the trust the other men had placed in him. She tried to keep her voice neutral, factual, but she could see her father's expression growing more thoughtful as she spoke. "And where is this Cole Patterson now?" Thomas asked when she had finished. "Out checking the fences on the north boundary," Victoria replied. "He should be back before dark." "I will want to speak with him," her father said. "Any man who helps my daughter and my ranch deserves my thanks." Victoria nodded, her stomach fluttering with nervousness. She had not yet mentioned her feelings for Cole, and she was not sure how her father would react when Cole asked for permission to court her. Thomas had always said he wanted Victoria to be happy, but he had also made it clear that he hoped she would marry well, perhaps to one of the mine owners or railroad men who were making fortunes in Colorado. Cole returned just as supper was being set on the table, and Victoria made the introductions. She watched anxiously as the two men shook hands, taking each other's measure. Her father was not a man easily impressed, and Cole had to know that he was being evaluated as much more than just a ranch hand. "Miss Whitmore tells me you have been a great help here," Thomas said as they all took their seats. "I appreciate a man who is not afraid of hard work." "Your daughter is the one who deserves credit, sir," Cole replied, his manner respectful but not obsequious. "She runs this ranch with a skill that would put many men to shame. You should be proud of her." Thomas's eyebrows rose slightly, and Victoria saw the ghost of a smile on his lips. "Oh, I am," he said. "Though I appreciate hearing it from someone else." Victoria has always been modest about her own abilities. The conversation over supper was pleasant enough, with Cole answering Thomas's questions about his background and experience without elaboration, but honestly. Victoria could see her father warming to Cole despite himself, recognizing in the younger man the same values he held: hard work, honesty, respect for the land and the animals. After the meal, Cole asked if he might speak with Thomas privately, and Victoria's heart began to pound. This was it, the moment that would determine everything. She retreated to the parlor with Mrs. Chen, pretending to work on mending but actually straining to hear what was being said in her father's study down the hall. The conversation lasted nearly an hour, and Victoria wore a hole in the sock she was supposedly repairing without even noticing. When the study door finally opened, she jumped to her feet, searching both men's faces for clues. "Victoria," her father said, "would you join us, please?" She walked down the hall on shaking legs, entering the study to find Cole standing by the window and her father seated behind his desk. Neither man's expression gave anything away. "Mr. Patterson has made me an interesting proposition," Thomas began, gesturing for Victoria to sit. "He has asked for permission to court you with the intention of eventually asking for your hand in marriage." Victoria's breath caught, but she forced herself to remain silent, to let her father finish. "He has been honest with me about his circumstances," Thomas continued. "He has told me about losing his father's ranch, about working his way north, about having little in the way of financial resources right now. He has also told me about his feelings for you, which he assures me are genuine and honorable." Thomas paused, steepling his fingers and studying his daughter over them. "What I want to know, Victoria, is how you feel. You are a grown woman, old enough to make your own choices, but you are also my only child, and I want what is best for you. So tell me honestly, is this what you want?" Victoria looked at Cole, who met her gaze steadily and then back at her father. "Yes," she said, her voice clear and firm. "I know it has only been a short time, Papa, but I have never been more certain of anything. Cole is everything I could want in a partner. He is kind and strong and honest. He understands me in a way no one else ever has, and I love him." She saw Cole's expression soften at her words, saw the relief and joy flash across his face. But it was her father's reaction that mattered most right now. Thomas was quiet for a long moment, his gaze moving between the two of them. Finally, he sighed, but it was not an unhappy sound. "Your mother would have liked him," he said to Victoria. "She always said you should marry for love, not money or position. She said the heart knows things that the head cannot understand." He turned to Cole. "I will agree to this courtship with certain conditions. First, you will continue to work here on the ranch and prove yourself over time. I need to know that you can provide for my daughter and that you are committed to building a life here. Second, the courtship will be proper. Mrs. Chen will act as chaperone when needed, and you will treat Victoria with the respect she deserves. Third, we will wait at least 6 months before any talk of marriage. If at the end of that time you both still feel the same way, you will have my blessing. Do these terms seem fair?" "More than fair, sir," Cole said, unable to keep the smile from his face. "Thank you for giving me this chance." "Do not thank me yet," Thomas said, but there was warmth in his voice. "Victoria is the best thing in my life, and I will be watching you closely to make sure you are worthy of her. But I will also be fair. If you prove yourself, you will find no obstacle from me." Victoria jumped up and hugged her father, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you, Papa," she whispered. "You will not regret this." "See that I do not," he replied, patting her back. Then, over her shoulder to Cole, "You may have a few minutes alone to celebrate, but keep it respectable. I am not so progressive that I will allow liberties." Victoria laughed through her tears, and Cole promised to behave. When Thomas left the study, closing the door but not quite all the way, Victoria flew into Cole's arms. "He said yes," she breathed against his chest. "I can hardly believe it." "I can," Cole said, holding her close. "Your father loves you and he wants you to be happy." "That was obvious from the moment I met him. But I meant what I told him, Victoria. I will work harder than I ever have to prove I am worthy of you." "You already are," Victoria insisted, tilting her face up to his. "But I understand why we need to wait. 6 months is not so long." Cole kissed her then, softly, mindful of her father's presence in the house. 6 months, he agreed, and then the rest of our lives. The months that followed were some of the happiest of Victoria's life, despite the hard work and occasional challenges. Cole threw himself into ranch work with determination, learning every aspect of the operation, earning the respect of the other men, and proving to Thomas that he was serious about building a future there. He also proved to be innovative, suggesting improvements to their breeding program and better ways to manage the herd rotation. Ideas that Thomas implemented and which showed immediate positive results. As autumn turned to winter, Cole and Victoria's relationship deepened. They rode together when they could, exploring the mountain trails around Telluride, visiting the town for supplies and occasional socials. Cole was introduced to Victoria's friends, and she was pleased to see how easily he fit in, how naturally he charmed everyone without seeming to try. The people of Telluride were an interesting mix. Miners and their families, shopkeepers, ranchers like the Whitmores, and the inevitable rougher element that came with any boomtown. Victoria had always been slightly separate from the social scene, preferring the ranch to the town, but with Cole by her side, she found herself enjoying the dances and gatherings more than she ever had before. In December, the first heavy snow came, blanketing the valley in white and turning the world into a sparkling wonderland. Victoria and Cole stood on the porch one evening, watching the flakes fall in the lamplight, and she leaned against him, content. "This is my favorite time of year," she said. "Everything is so quiet and peaceful under the snow. It feels like the world is holding its breath." "It is beautiful," Cole agreed, his arm around her waist. "Though I confess I am not looking forward to working in this weather," Victoria laughed. "You will get used to it. Or at least you will learn to layer your clothing properly." "I think I will need you to keep me warm," Cole teased, and she swatted his arm playfully. "Behave," she said, but she was smiling. "Papa might be watching." "Your father likes me now," Cole said confidently. "He told me yesterday that I am doing good work." "High praise from Thomas Whitmore," Victoria said. "He does not give compliments lightly." As Christmas approached, Victoria found herself planning for the holiday with more enthusiasm than she had felt in years. Mrs. Chen helped her decorate the house with pine boughs and ribbons, and Thomas surprised them all by bringing home a small tree that they set up in the parlor. Cole carved ornaments from wood scraps in the evenings, simple but beautiful shapes of horses and stars, and Victoria painted them with care. On Christmas Eve, after a hearty supper, they exchanged gifts. Thomas gave Victoria a new saddle, beautifully tooled leather that must have cost him dearly. Victoria gave her father a set of books he had been wanting, and Mrs. Chen received a warm shawl that Victoria had knitted herself. When it came time for Cole to give Victoria his gift, he seemed nervous, pulling a small package from his pocket. Inside was a delicate silver necklace with a pendant shaped like a horse in mid-gallop. "It is not much," Cole said as Victoria gasped in delight. "But I saw it in town and thought of you, of that first day and the mare and how brave you were." "It is perfect," Victoria said, her eyes shining. "Will you put it on me?" He fastened it around her neck, his fingers gentle against her skin, and she touched the pendant, feeling the weight of it settle against her collarbone. Then she handed him her gift, a new pair of riding gloves lined with soft fur, and a book of poetry by Walt Whitman that she thought he might enjoy. "I noticed your gloves were worn through," she said, "and I thought you might like to read something other than ranch accounts for a change." Cole looked at the gifts with genuine appreciation, then pulled her into a hug that lasted just long enough to be proper. "Thank you," he said into her hair, "for everything. This has been the best Christmas I have had in years." "Mine too," Victoria whispered back. Thomas watched them with a smile, and even Mrs. Chen looked pleased. It was a good night, full of warmth and laughter and the promise of more to come. January brought bitter cold and more snow, testing everyone's endurance. There were days when the wind howled down from the peaks with such ferocity that it was dangerous to go outside, and the cattle huddled together in the lower pastures, waiting out the storms. Cole and the other ranch hands took turns checking on the animals, breaking ice on water troughs, hauling hay through drifts that sometimes reached their waists. One particularly bad night, Cole did not return when expected from checking the cattle, and Victoria paced the floor in growing worry. Thomas and Frank prepared to go out looking for him, but just as they were saddling horses, Cole stumbled through the door, half frozen and exhausted. "One of the cows got caught in a ravine," he explained through chattering teeth as Victoria and Mrs. Chen rushed to get him warm. "Had to pull her out, took longer than I thought." Victoria wanted to scold him for worrying her, but she was too relieved that he was safe. She helped him to the fire, wrapping him in blankets, pressing hot coffee into his hands. It was only later, after he had thawed and eaten and gone to the bunkhouse to sleep, that she allowed herself to really feel the fear she had experienced, imagining him lost in the snow. "This is ranch life," her father said gently, finding her still sitting in the parlor long after everyone else had gone to bed. "There will always be moments of danger, times when things do not go as planned. If you marry Cole, you will have to get used to nights like this." "I know," Victoria said, "but knowing something in your head and feeling it in your heart are different things. When he did not come back, I kept thinking about all the things that could go wrong, and I realized how much I need him now. How empty my life would be if something happened to him." Thomas sat down beside her, taking her hand. "That is love," he said. "The fear that comes with it, the vulnerability. When your mother was sick, every day I was terrified of losing her, and when she died, I thought I would not survive the grief. But I also would not trade a single moment I had with her, not even knowing how it ended. The love was worth the pain." "Do you think Mama would approve of Cole?" Victoria asked, a question she had been wanting to ask for months. "I think she would adore him," Thomas said without hesitation. "She always believed you had a gift for seeing the true heart of a person. She would trust your judgment, and so do I." Victoria hugged her father, grateful for his wisdom and his support. When she finally went to bed that night, she slept peacefully, knowing that despite the challenges, she was exactly where she was meant to be. February brought a thaw, and with it came the first real signs that spring was not far off. The snow began to recede from the lower elevations, revealing brown grass that would soon turn green. The cattle grew more active, and there was a general sense of energy returning to the ranch after the lethargy of winter. It was in early March, just as the first wildflowers were beginning to poke through the remaining snow, that Cole came to Victoria with a serious expression. "Walk with me," he asked, and she agreed, sensing that something important was on his mind. They walked to their favorite spot by the creek, which was running high with snowmelt, the sound of rushing water filling the air. Cole helped her to sit on a flat rock, then stood before her, his hands in his pockets, looking uncharacteristically nervous. "Victoria," he began, then paused, seeming to gather his thoughts. "We have known each other for 7 months now. Your father said we should wait 6 months before talking of marriage, and we have passed that mark. In that time, I have tried my best to prove to him and to you that I am serious about this, about us. I have worked harder than I ever have, and I have saved every penny I have earned. It is not much, but it is a start." He pulled something from his pocket, and Victoria's breath caught as she realized it was a ring. Simple, a thin gold band with a small but lovely blue stone set in it. "This was my mother's ring," Cole said, his voice thick with emotion. "It is the only thing of value I have left from my family. My father gave it to me before he died, told me to give it to the woman I wanted to spend my life with. Victoria Whitmore, you are that woman. You are everything I never knew I was looking for. Will you marry me?" Victoria's eyes filled with tears, but they were tears of joy. "Yes," she said, her voice breaking. "Yes, Cole, 1,000 times yes." He slipped the ring onto her finger and it fit perfectly, the blue stone catching the light. Then he pulled her to her feet and kissed her with all the passion they had been holding back for months, and Victoria melted into him, feeling like her heart might burst from happiness. They returned to the house hand in hand, and when they told Thomas the news, he smiled broadly and shook Cole's hand. "Welcome to the family, son," he said, and Victoria saw tears in her father's eyes, the first she had seen since her mother's death. Mrs. Chen cried openly and immediately began planning the wedding, chattering about what needed to be done, how many people to invite, what food to prepare. Victoria let her talk, content to just hold Cole's hand and dream about their future together. They were married in late May when the mountains were green and the wildflowers covered the meadows in blankets of color. The ceremony took place at the ranch, with most of Telluride in attendance. Victoria wore her mother's wedding dress, which Mrs. Chen had altered to fit her perfectly, and Cole wore a new suit that he had bought with his savings, looking so handsome that Victoria could barely breathe when she saw him. Frank walked her down the makeshift aisle they had set up in the garden, and when he placed her hand in Cole's, he whispered, "Your mama would be so proud," which made Victoria cry even before the ceremony began. The preacher from town performed the service, and when he pronounced them husband and wife, Cole kissed her with such tenderness that Victoria felt like she was floating. The celebration afterward lasted late into the night, with music and dancing and more food than seemed possible. People congratulated them, wished them well, and told stories about how they had known from the beginning that the two were meant for each other. As the evening wound down and the guests began to leave, Victoria and Cole slipped away to the house that Thomas had given them as a wedding present. It was a smaller building on the property, originally meant for the foreman but now renovated and furnished for the newlyweds. It was cozy and perfect, and when Cole carried her over the threshold, Victoria laughed with pure joy. That night, as they lay together in their marriage bed, Cole traced his fingers over Victoria's face, looking at her with such love that she felt tears prick at her eyes again. "I cannot believe you are really mine," he whispered. "Sometimes I still think I will wake up and find this was all a dream." "It is real," Victoria assured him, pressing her hand over his heart. "We are real. This love is real. I will spend every day of the rest of my life making sure you never regret choosing me," Cole promised. "I could never regret it," Victoria said. "You are my heart, Cole Patterson. You are my home." They made love that night with the tenderness and passion of two people who had waited for each other, who had chosen each other deliberately and completely. And afterward, wrapped in each other's arms, they talked about their dreams for the future, about the life they would build together. The years that followed were full and rich, with all the joys and sorrows that come with living a full life. Cole proved to be not just a good ranch hand but a natural leader, and within 2 years, when Frank finally retired, Thomas made Cole his partner, giving him an ownership stake in the ranch that was now officially called Whitmore Patterson Ranch. Victoria and Cole worked side by side, building the ranch into one of the most successful in the region. They modernized their operations, bought neighboring land when it became available, and developed a reputation for breeding exceptional horses. But more than the business success, they built a life filled with love and laughter. Their first child, a son they named Thomas after Victoria's father, was born in the spring of 1884, 2 years after their marriage. Victoria had never known she could love someone as instantly and completely as she loved that tiny baby, and watching Cole with his son, seeing the tenderness and wonder in his face, made her fall in love with her husband all over again. Thomas Sr. doted on his grandson, spending hours with the baby, telling him stories about the ranch, promising to teach him everything he knew. It was a golden time, full of hope and happiness. They had two more children over the next few years, a daughter named Clara in 1886 and another son, William, in 1888. The house that had once seemed so cozy now felt fuller, noisier, more alive. Victoria sometimes felt exhausted trying to keep up with three active children while also helping run the ranch, but she would not have traded it for anything. Cole was an exceptional father, patient and playful, teaching the children to ride almost as soon as they could walk, showing them the land with the same reverence he had always felt for it. And he was an even better husband, never taking Victoria for granted, always making time for just the two of them even as their lives got busier and more complicated. One evening, when the children were finally asleep and they were sitting on the porch of their home, Victoria leaned against Cole and sighed contentedly. "You remember that day in the barn?" she asked, "when I was talking to myself and you overheard?" "Every detail," Cole said, his arm tightening around her. "I remember thinking you were the bravest person I had ever seen, facing your fears alone but not letting them defeat you." "I was not alone," Victoria said. "You were there, even before I knew it. You have been there every moment since, and I cannot imagine my life without you now." "You will never have to," Cole promised. "We are bound together, Victoria, not just by vows or children but by something deeper, by choosing each other every single day." As the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange, Victoria thought about how far she had come from that frightened girl in the barn. She had learned that she was stronger than she knew, that love could find you in the most unexpected ways, that sometimes the best advice was the kind you gave yourself if you were brave enough to listen. Years continued to pass, each one bringing its own challenges and triumphs. Thomas Sr. passed away peacefully in his sleep in 1895, at the age of 68, and they buried him next to Victoria's mother in the small cemetery on the ranch. It was a hard loss, but Victoria took comfort in knowing that her father had lived to see her happy, had known his grandchildren, had died proud of the legacy he was leaving behind. The ranch continued to thrive under Cole and Victoria's management. Their children grew into capable young people who loved the land as much as their parents did. Thomas Jr. showed a natural talent for working with horses. Clara had her mother's head for business and numbers, and William was fascinated by the new ranching techniques that were being developed as the century turned. In 1900, as the new century dawned, Victoria and Cole stood together looking out over the land they had built their life on. They were in their early 40s now, their hair beginning to show threads of silver, their faces marked by years of sun and wind. But their love had not diminished. If anything, it had deepened, seasoned by time and shared experiences. 18 years, Victoria said, shaking her head in wonder. "Can you believe it has been 18 years since we married?" "And 20 since I first met you," Cole added. 20 years since I walked into that barn and found you talking to yourself, giving yourself the pep talk you needed to keep going." "That was good advice, take it," Victoria quoted with a smile, remembering his words. "I did take it, you know. I took my own advice and I fought for what mattered. And then you came along and became part of what mattered most." Cole kissed her temple, a gesture so familiar and dear that it still made her heart flutter. "We have built something amazing here," he said. "Not just a ranch, but a family, a legacy. Our children will carry this forward and their children after them." "And it all started because a cowboy listened to a woman talking to herself in a barn," Victoria said with a laugh. "Who would have thought?" "I would have," Cole said seriously. "From that very first moment, I knew you were special. I knew you were someone worth listening to, worth knowing, worth loving." They stood together as the sun set on another day, another year, another chapter of their lives. They had weathered storms both literal and metaphorical. They had celebrated victories and mourned losses. They had raised children and built a business. They had loved each other through easy times and hard, never wavering, never giving up. As the years continued to roll forward, Victoria and Cole grew old together with grace. They watched their children marry and have children of their own. They saw the world change around them, the Wild West slowly becoming less wild, more settled and civilized. Telluride grew from a rough mining town into a more respectable community. The ranch adapted to new technologies and methods, always staying ahead of the curve thanks to the innovative spirit that both Victoria and Cole shared. They celebrated their 30th wedding anniversary in 1912, surrounded by children and grandchildren, friends and neighbors. It was a joyous occasion, full of laughter and memories, stories told and retold about the early days, about how Victoria and Cole had met, about the life they had built together. In 1915, when they were both in their mid-50s, Cole suffered a serious injury when a horse threw him during a roundup. Victoria nursed him through his recovery with the same fierce determination she had shown that day with the mare, refusing to let him give up, pushing him to heal even when he was discouraged. And Cole recovered, slower than he once would have but complete, and he never forgot that it was Victoria's strength that had pulled him through. "You saved me again," he told her once he was back on his feet. "Just like you have been saving me since the day we met." "We save each other," Victoria corrected. "That is what love is, Cole. It is being each other's strength when we have none of our own." They continued to work the ranch together, though they gradually turned over more responsibilities to their children. Thomas Jr. took over the day-to-day operations, with Clara managing the financial side and William overseeing the breeding program they had developed. It was satisfying to see their legacy in capable hands, to know that what they had built would continue. In their later years, Victoria and Cole spent more time simply enjoying each other's company. They took long rides through the mountains, moving slower now but no less appreciative of the beauty around them. They sat on their porch in the evenings, holding hands and watching sunsets, talking about their memories and their blessings. "I've had a good life," Victoria said one evening when they were both in their late 60s. "I have been blessed beyond measure." "As have I," Cole agreed. "And it is all because of you. You changed my life completely, Victoria. You took a drifter with nothing and made him into a man with everything that matters." "You were always that man," Victoria insisted. "I just helped you see it." They lived into their 70s, which was a good long life for that time and place. They saw the world change dramatically around them, saw automobiles replace horses in many places, saw electricity come even to remote areas like theirs. But through all the changes, their love remained constant. Victoria passed away first in the spring of 1928, peacefully in her sleep with Cole holding her hand. She was 70 years old, and she had lived every one of those years fully. Cole mourned her with a depth of grief that surprised even him after so many years together, but he also celebrated the life they had shared, the love that had sustained them both. He lived another 3 years without her, surrounded by children and grandchildren, and even great-grandchildren who all carried pieces of Victoria in them. He told them stories about their grandmother, about her bravery and kindness, about how she had given herself the best advice, and then had the courage to take it. And when Cole finally passed away in his sleep in the fall of 1931, at the age of 74, his children found something tucked under his pillow. It was a letter, written in his shaking hand just days before he died, addressed to Victoria. In it, He told her one more time how much he loved her, how grateful he was for every moment they had shared. He reminded her of that first day in the barn, of the words she had spoken to herself that had drawn him to her. He told her that she had been his greatest adventure, his truest love, his home in every sense of the word. And he ended with the words he had spoken to her that first day, the words that had started everything. That was good advice. You took it, and it led you to me and me to you. And what a beautiful journey it has been. They were buried side by side in the cemetery on the ranch, next to her parents, under the wide Colorado sky they had both loved so much. Their children erected a simple stone that read, Victoria Whitmore Patterson and Cole Patterson. Partners in life, partners in love, partners forever. The ranch they had built together continued for generations, passed down through their children and grandchildren, always staying in the family. And sometimes, when the evening sun cast long shadows across the land, people said they could feel the presence of Victoria and Cole, still watching over the place they had loved, still together in whatever came after. Their love story became legend in Telluride, the tale of a woman who gave herself good advice in a barn and a cowboy who listened, then told her to take it. It was a story about bravery and second chances, about finding love in unexpected places, about building something lasting out of faith and hard work. It was a story that proved that sometimes the best things in life come from the most ordinary moments, that love can strike like lightning and sustain like steady flame, that two people who choose each other every day can build a life that echoes through time. And in the end, it was a story about how Victoria Whitmore and Cole Patterson found each other on a late summer day in 1882, and how that finding changed everything, creating a legacy of love that would endure long after they were gone. Proof that true love never really dies but lives on in the hearts and lives it touches, generation after generation, forever and always.